All right, guys, here we go with the notes for Chapter 13, Social Media Monitoring. Social media monitoring is defined as the process of tracking and measuring and evaluating an organization's social media marketing initiatives. So all three of those are involved in actually monitoring what is going on with your social media presence. Monitoring is one of the final steps in the planning cycle. The steps of listening and of setting objectives are a necessary precursor to monitoring, especially to the selection of the metrics to monitor. So keep in mind, this is going near the end of the social media cycle that we learned about in Chapter 2. But you have to do those first parts of the cycle in order for them to be effective. You have to be listening. You have to know what your audience is saying, what they're looking for. You have to set objectives. You have to know what it is that you want your social media presence to do in order to be able to measure anything of importance and have some sort of standard to be able to go by. So now the importance of social media monitoring. The key question for any business is, what is the ROI, or the return on investment, on whatever it may be? In this case, we're talking about social media marketing. And when you try to figure out what the ROI is on SMM, the question becomes particularly vexing. It's rather hard to be able to succinctly be able to put that information in such a way that you can very clearly see what exactly is going on. So it takes a bit of a challenge to be able to navigate through the data, to navigate through what certain things are happening and are not happening, and try to determine how that translates into better business for your brand, or perhaps that something needs to be adjusted. Because really only 15% of marketers stated that they could measure the ROI on their SMM. And so that's about 1 in 6. It is a challenge to be able to navigate through all the data to determine what data is relevant, and to, be able to make some sort of sense on, is what we're doing worth it? Listening and tracking. Social media tracking is the process of finding and listening to content on the social web. So we are taking a look at all the information that is out there, and we are trying to keep tabs on its progress, how it's doing, how many people are seeing it, how many people are interacting with it. That is all tracking. In order to use platforms and tools wisely, marketers must understand which metrics have a direct impact on their business results. Not every piece of data is going to be relevant for you. You have to determine which items are going to be the most effective for you and determine how to decipher that information. One way to track brand mentions is to identify the keywords that will retrieve relevant data. So depending on what it is you're promoting, if there's certain words that are relevant to your brand, to your organization, you may want to track those. If there's certain marketing campaigns that you're using, those keywords would also be helpful. If there's different emotions that you believe that your audience may be feeling or reacting to, those could possibly be good keywords for you as well. Marketers can track hashtags of interest to them, but care must be taken in data collection and interpretation. The most direct way to track is to set up a hashtag and then promote it. So many times when you'll see campaigns where they will ask people to post on social media using a certain hashtag. It's a campaign to try to see how much awareness that they can create and how much buzz they can create from doing their campaign and get the word out about their product, their organization, their brand. Measuring. The need to measure social media remains of paramount concern for businesses because it enables marketers to assess progress towards achieving marketing goals, determine how strategies are performing, and to make necessary adjustments to achieve overall business goals. So, again, it is that idea that you have to be able to measure the things that are going on. And in order for you to measure something, you have to measure it against something. So there has to be some sort of standard, some sort of criteria that you're looking for that you want to meet or exceed. So you have to be able to determine that. One of the efforts to standardize models and terminology had produced what's called the Valid Metrics Framework. There's a better picture of this graphic in your textbook. This is figure 13.3, but the Valid Metrics Framework is basically broken down into 5 parts. There is exposure, engagement, influence, impact, and advocacy. So those are different criteria that you could use to determine how well your social media presence is doing. With exposure, you have the opportunity to attend to content, and that is one of the results that you can have there is checking on number of page views. The more page views you have, the more exposure that you're getting from your posts. Engagement, interaction with content. So it's the idea that people don't just see it and scroll by, but they actually participate with the things that you put out online as well. So one of the measures there would be time spent with particular content. Influence, the ability to change opinions or behavior. And this is the case where you are trying to persuade people to kind of come over to your side, to patronize your services, purchase your products, have a change of opinion on a certain issue. And one of the things that is used to determine the effectiveness there is something called a clout score. How much clout do you have online? Impact, the effect on the target audience. So do you leave an impression with those that you're trying to reach out to? Is it something that they're going to remember? And one of the ways that we can measure that is whether they actually pull the trigger and do a purchase of the things that you have to offer. Finally, advocacy. Suggest actions to another user. And that would be one of those where we get involved in the word of mouth aspect of social media, where others are willingly sharing your content and helping to create awareness for you. So recommendations is another metric that would be valuable to many people. So that is the Valid Metrics Framework. Now let's go on to some important definitions. First off, a metric. What is a metric? It's a number. It can be either a count or a ratio. It can also be either quantitative or qualitative. And when we talk about it in terms of being qualitative, it can give sentiment analysis in that process. So basically, any sort of data that can be kind of narrowed down into some sort of a figure is going to be a metric. Okay, the next 3 are kind of related to each other: goals, strategy, and business objectives. Goals are your broad primary outcomes. That is what you ultimately want to achieve. Strategies are the approaches you take to achieve that goal. And then the business objectives are going to be measurable steps you take to achieve a strategy. They're going to be straightforward, numeric objectives that can be measured without equivocation. So there's going to be, it's almost kind of a tier sort of system where the goal is what you ultimately want to achieve within a certain project. The strategy is how you get to that goal. And the business objectives are the things that you do to implement those strategies. KPIs. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. It's a metric that helps you understand how you are doing against your objectives. A KPI is a metric that directly measures impact on achievement of a business objective. So it's going to be a number that tries to quantify the way that you are performing and achieving some of the different things that you are trying to do. And those numbers are going to be very helpful for you in determining how well you are meeting your objectives and then ultimately your strategies and your goals as well. ROI, return on investment. ROI is the earning power of assets measured as the ratio of the net income, which is profit less depreciation, to the average capital employed or equity capital in a company or a project. And you see the equation there in your notes. ROI would be that ratio or that division, income from operations divided by operating assets times 100 to get a percentage value there. Now that is a rather traditional business definition of ROI. And when we try to implement that into the social media world, that's why ROI can be, in part, it can be a little more complicated to try to determine because the terms, they're difficult to define. This is the essence of the difficulty of calculating the ROI of SMM campaigns. So, there was a suggestion to have ROI redefined with application of the Valid Metrics framework. And it's really the same sort of thing, just kind of said in a different way. So if we're looking at things from a social media perspective, well, how we should be looking at ROI is that it would be the difference of the total money that's earned, saved, or avoided less the total amount invested. So in essence, that would be your profit. Okay. Total money earned, you can think of as your gross. And then once you take out money invested, your expenses and all that sort of thing, then you have your net income or net profit. Once you've taken that difference, then you want to divide that number by the total amount invested and then multiply by 100. And then that percentage point would be your return on investment. So obviously, if you've got numbers that are higher than 100%, that is going to be a much larger profit margin. So we want that number to be rather high overall. And we can see that as we use some of the different metrics that are available to us out there. In the real world of social media campaigns, it may be hard to judge the sales that result from social media activity. And that is another challenge, to be able to try to determine to say, well, look, we got 1 million likes on a particular post about a new product that we're promoting. Does that 1 million likes translate into a certain number of sales? Well, that can be hard to determine. And there are ways to try to guesstimate that, but the numbers aren't going to be as clear cut as certain things that you might see on a traditional financial spreadsheet. Let's take a look at measuring. Choosing the appropriate measure, the appropriate metrics. Choosing the appropriate metrics is based on marketing objectives. Marketers don't create measures with business value unless they first have measurable objectives and their map for metrics to the objectives. So again, you have to be able to measure, and that means you have to have some sort of a standard against which to measure. The first step is to turn to the Valid Metrics framework and to determine where the objectives fit into that framework. This task is easier if the SMM campaign is short and focused on a single type of objective. So you have a very clear, defined goal that you are reaching for. You have a very clear, defined objective. And to not have those things spelled out in such a way, or if they're rather abstract in the way that you present them, or if they cover a lot of ground that would be kind of hard to measure overall, it's not going to be as effective to do your measuring. It's best to be able to concentrate on one piece of it at a time, so that when you're doing your measuring, it's much more clear as to what you are measuring and how well the measurement is meeting up to the expectations that you have. Likes and shares on Facebook are useful metrics for gauging some level of engagement with the campaign, and Facebook provides them for each post. So this is the kind of thing where, it doesn't necessarily mean that because you got a bunch of likes and shares that it automatically means so many people are aware of your product or are engaged with your product in a positive way, but it's a pretty good representative value. People can like and share by accident. You might have some bots that are in there that are liking and sharing. And we'll talk more about that sort of thing in just a moment. But by and large, if you see that something has been received favorably through a large number of likes and shares, generally that's going to mean that the awareness of who you are and what you're doing is out there and is out there effectively. Facebook provides the page administrators with the reach, which is the number of people that the post was served to. And it does that for each post as one of the page insights for users of business pages. So you might be able to see how many people liked and how many people shared, but you can also see how many people that your message actually reached to, that it made it onto their newsfeed. Consequently, they have both exposure and engagement metrics for Facebook. Exposure would be the reach number, and engagement would be the likes and shares. Now, this table from your textbook, this is table 13.1, talks about some of the specific metrics that are available from the Valid Metrics framework. And you can see there's all sorts of different criteria that can be used as a measuring standard when it comes to each of those 5 elements of the Valid Metrics framework. And it's going to be up to you as the marketer to try to determine which numbers are going to be of most importance to you. Not everything is going to be valuable to every marketer, but there are certain things that are going to determine how well a message is being received, how cost effective it is to put the effort that you're putting into a social media campaign, and all those sorts of things. So there's all sorts of different options for you to be able to have different types of measurements and standards when it comes to gauging your progress on social media. Part of the audience development is persuading your own audience to share with their audiences. In order to understand the total audience a piece of content is reaching, the audiences of the initial audience must be determined. So basically what that is saying is we've talked a lot about knowing your audience. So you have to know where your audience is at online, how they expect to receive certain types of content online, all those sorts of things, so that the messages that you put out on social media are going to be effective, reach out to them, and be received favorably. When it comes to them sharing that content with others, and if your message continues to be effective, something else that's valuable is helping to understand the audiences of the people that shared your content for you. So it's not just why did your audience share it, but why did the audiences of those people take the message, receive it, and embrace it. because there's likely going to be different aspects of those other audiences that wouldn't necessarily be in your target demographic, that it appeals to them on a certain level as well. And you're talking about different sets of beliefs, attitudes, values, psychographics, all those sorts of things. And if you understand that, you may possibly have a much larger audience that you can reach out to and continue to see success in social media.